responsible for our own false colors and contrast checks.
Well, the fact that Alex put all those FS-HDRs, and not all of them, but has a number of them in there, means that at some point he will, I assume, have control over the color balance, luminosity, and all the rest of the aspects of each signal coming in and then, of course, going into the show. So I think that the goal seems to be to work towards central operations having control, some control at least over that, if not full control. I think the goal is eventually, like any show, you want everybody on your show to look great.
Yesterday, I killed all my podcasts. I canceled my Libsyn account.
Podcast aside? How many did you have to terminate?
There was a couple. I killed my Libsyn
Murder,
account.
she wrote.
Libsyn is, if you want to do an audio podcast, Libsyn is probably the best deal to do it. It's a really great service. You don't pay per download. So if your show gets super popular, which mine never did, if your show gets popular, you don't pay through the nose, you know. That was the curse of podcasting in the beginning. Your popularity could cost you an arm and a leg. You don't pay for downloads, you only pay for the upload. And if you suspend production on a show, but you want to keep it active to the world, you can downgrade your service to very little because you're not uploading anymore. You're just maintaining what's already there.
So you could possibly archive in like AM radio bandwidth, and then it'll just sit there.
No, you can leave it. You could leave the full file that you uploaded.
Oh, okay.
So you pay per month for the amount you want to upload. So I think it worked out where if you were going to do, you know, a fairly good sounding show once a week, you know, 4 uploads a month, it was like a $20 a month. Maybe it was more, 25, I don't know, like $20 a month to upload. But when you stop uploading, you could downgrade it to like, I can't remember what it was. But it was just an annoying thing. Like I haven't done episodes in years and years. So I was like, I don't need to. This history is over. I have the files on an archive drive somewhere.
Are you nostalgic? Did you feel bad when you dumped it?
No, I did not.
Yeah, about 5 years ago, I went through I got to dump all these old tapes. I've been lugging them around too long, and there was way too much. And I had about 2 seconds of nostalgia. A lot of work went into those. Out. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do on officehours.global. Our first hour is always a general discussion of production and IT-related topics where we answer audience-submitted questions. Second hour, typically a deeper dive into a topic, and today you are going to see your panel in HDR. We've been in this process of migrating to a possible HDR chain, And I think Alex has been spending a lot of time and effort to get it up. And today we are going to do a ruthless review of each panelist as we look in the new HDR environment. So we're looking forward to that. Alex, what's our first question for today?
Our first question for today is from Cindy Drozda in Erie, Colorado. And Cindy asks, is it possible to connect a camera to an ATEM Mini, upstream key out the green background, and output it with a transparent background to be used as an overlay in vMix? If not, would the Ultimatte do it?
And Guy Cochran's going to help us out here. Guy?
Hey, so that's a good question. The first thing that you could do, but it's not going to look as clean, is to go ahead and do your key in the ATEM Mini, but you will have a black background, and then you could take that black and you could dump that out in vMix. But that's not the perfect way of doing it. The perfect way, two options: the Ultimatte, the 495 version, will do the compositing in the box, which probably doesn't help you because you probably want to use vMix to load your backgrounds in, which you could do with that 495 device. But again, it's going to smash it down. That's your composite. The next step up is the $895 version, which has two SDI inputs. And with that one, you can actually do two SDI outputs, which are key and fill. And then in vMix, when you add an input, there is a box there that says use as key fill. And so you check that, and that will give you that transparency. So the box that you need, so you need a couple pieces. It's SDI capture card into vMix, and you need the $895 version of the Ultimatte, because the other one, the base level one, only has HDMI. So there's quite a bit going on there. And this also works with mimoLive now. Well, I don't know if it's been released to the public, but we have them. For our purposes, for the one-button studio, we specifically needed what vMix does, which is separates those two out. So you will be able to do it in mimoLive in the next release that should be out if it's not already out. And yeah, hopefully that helps answer your question.
Alex, you had something to add?
Yeah, I would just say that, always approach green screen with caution. I think a lot of people overuse it. I think the one-button studio is a perfect example of why you'd want to use it. But there's many, many other times when people are using it where it's not a great solution. If there's a way for you to find a physical background, you always want to try to use it over that. But the Ultimatte does work very well if you need it.
Next question.
Next question is from, sorry, this is still not working. Hold on. Next question is from Zach Phillips. As a Mac OS veteran of 33 years, I am ashamed to ask this question. Why does my Mac always seem to restore a set of apps and windows from a randomly chosen moment in time on every restart, even when I tell it not to?
And John Snyder's going to help us. John?
Yeah, you shouldn't be embarrassed for asking that question. Apple's gotten a lot less stable on its window management and restoration over the last 10 years, I would say. 3 places you might want to check is first, when you restart, there's a checkbox in the restart dialog that says reopen windows from last session. Make sure that's unchecked. In settings general, there's an application by application checkbox that says something like reopen windows after you close a program. But the one you'd really want to look at is under your user settings in system preferences. Check your user account for login items and see if there's anything that's allowed to turn on login that you maybe were not aware of.
Nice answer. Thank you very much. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. And Andy asks, our Zoom cloud recordings are at 25 frames per second. Is it best to use 30p cameras, or should I try to match Zoom's frame rate?
Yeah, this is a process. There's so many different frame rates now, and I think it's gotten better over the course of time. In the early days, I always tried to keep everything exactly the same, but the pull-ups and pull-down, which is kind of the technical process of taking one frame rate and matching it to another, have gotten more automatic and better over time. Alex, you had additional thinking?
Yeah, I would really, if for a meeting that matters, I'd really think about recording it outside of Zoom. So Zoom's going to record 25. It should be delivering at 30 frames per second. And so you should be able to do something that allows you to have some kind of, if it matters, and if you're really looking at like it matters enough to change the kind of cameras you're using, then what you should do is record using something like Zoom ISO or even just a Zoom room or something that's going to be a participant that's going to look at your view because the cloud recording is bad. Like it's just bad. Like it's a horrible quality. It's just horrible quality. So if you're thinking about it, if for things that are just like, hey, we just want to remember what we said, it's fine. Like it works great as a perfunctory, thing to do. But I would never, if I cared about my frame rate, I would never use a cloud recording.
David Paskin has a thought as well. David?
Not a thought, more of a question for Alex. Why is that? Why are Zoom cloud recordings so crummy?
Money. Like it just costs money. Like, so the thing is that it's 24, we used to do Mac break video. And when we did it all at 24 frames per second. And I talk a lot about how much I dislike 24 frames a second. And the reason we did that was money. Like it was less money. It was 1/6 less bandwidth, and at the time I was paying for it. So it's it's a chunk less to do it that way. And so 25 is kind of a minimum broadcast. I mean, maybe they have other technical reasons for doing it, but it does save. It literally slices off 1/6 of the cost of storing it and to manage it, and so those and all of those things. And so it when you think about it in large amounts, that can turn into millions and millions of dollars of savings by just carving that off. You have to remember that, like when they build buildings, they have to watch out because the contractors will cut off 1/8 inch of the thickness of the wall and save like $20,000. So it's just one of those things that you just shaving those little things off make a difference. I think that's the reason. I don't think there's any good technical reason for it.
Chris Fenwick, you wanted to weigh in on this?
Alex, the best cost-saving story I ever heard. A friend of mine told me a story about how they changed the font back in the old days of phone books. They changed it from one font to another and saved millions in ink.
Just less ink.
They changed a font.
Went to thin. Yeah,
the other thing I was going to say is that a lot of us are starting to getting these messages from Zoom saying, "Hey, your cloud recording is really full." I know yours is super overkill. Doug Ferguson's was 1100% of what it's supposed to be.
That's nothing.
Mine was, I know that's amateur numbers. Mine was like 360% of what it was supposed to be. What do you care to share?
Mine is.
Did you get the message? Did you get the message that says, please?
I didn't get the message. I've been getting the message for years. I got cut off this week. So this week I got cut off. Like I can't do cloud recordings on the 090 account now I'm in trouble because I have to figure out how to get them all off. And it was funny that I started searching for what is a script to take everything off of Zoom, and Rupert is the one that actually answered it in the Zoom thing. So I'm trying to get a hold of Rupert to say, hey, how do I actually do this? Because I need a script that's going to pull them all off because it's 500 and some shows from Office Hours that I don't necessarily want to give up. And just the warning is 1.6 terabytes of 58 gigs.
Oh, man.
So it's like you're allowed to have 58 and you have 1.6 terabytes of it. And it just didn't say anything. It sent warnings, but it didn't do anything. So I was like, we'll see. I'll get around to it. It just, when I started downloading them one at a time, and it was super painful. And so I was like, I'll get around to this. And it's just
maybe you should just drive down to Zoom headquarters with a hard drive and say, hey, it's Alex. Oh yeah, we've been expecting you. Come in the back door. There are some things to remember. You can, I believe the display shows you like 15 at a time. You can, if it's something you have to do, you can search for like a show name and say, oh yeah, I totally don't need those. You can select them all and delete them 15 at a time.
It would actually take me longer to figure that out. Like, to me, I'm just kind of like, I just want to download them all into a drive. And so I think that we as a group probably want them to be around because they weren't saved anywhere. So, we don't know. So so now we have to record locally until.
But to our point, the question, David's question was, why is this? And you said money. It's hitting them, and somebody has the initiative right now. Hey, we have to clear off some hard drives here.
Yeah, they've been very understanding. No shade on Zoom. They've been very understanding for a very long period of time for me to leave so much stuff just sitting there. So I don't have any upset about it.
It's bad when everybody else gets an email and you get somebody showing up at your door.
Yeah, they're like, no
problem.
Yeah, no credit for you.
Let's go to the next question.
Sorry, I forgot it was me. Next question is from Glenn Motto in Richmond, Virginia. And Glenn asks, Alex mentioned recently that he likes to purchase from Amazon because of easy returns. What items should not be purchased on Amazon due to risk of knockoffs, bogus items, etc.?
John Snyder stutters. John?
I think the bigger risk is the sellers that you're choosing rather than whether or not you purchase it from Amazon. So be really careful. In my previous life, I was a food safety manager, and I would not purchase anything that would pose any sort of food safety risk, anything made out of thin glass or anything living or anything dead.
There you go. David Paskin?
I actually think the biggest risk is managing expectations. Same day and next day delivery has destroyed any other company for me. If it takes more than a day to receive something, I find myself so impatient, and it really is a problem, I think.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that what Jeff Bezos used to say, your margin is my opportunity, and I think it's your inconvenience is my opportunity as well. The hard part is that exactly what David said. I mean, problem is I have everything all packaged up in Amazon, so it's very easy for me to order something really, really fast from my phone. Oh, I think about something, I just order it, and I know that if I don't like it, the next time I go shopping in Whole Foods, I'm just going to drop that thing off on a box with a QR code and send it back. And it just makes it super hard to justify, like the time it takes for me to figure out if everything. I'm well trained. Like I open up things and I very carefully take them apart, and I take everything I take off of them goes back in the box, and I cut the labels. I cut everything with a razor blade or a utility knife or whatever. And I'm very, very careful about how I unpack things so that I can repack them and send them back. So I've been doing that for years. But with Amazon, they actually tell you they don't want you to bring the box because it takes up too much space. Like that, you literally get instructed not to bring the box. I bring it anyway because I don't know what to put. I don't know how to hold it otherwise. But it's super convenient. I think as far as avoiding things, anything that's too good to be true is probably still too good to be true. A lot of us got caught up in the Stream Deck, the infamous Stream Deck with what was it, the Stream Deck scam of 2021 was what we got. And now I have to admit, I knew it wasn't going to happen, but I wanted to see what the mechanics were of it. I still haven't got my Stream Deck. So anyway, and I haven't gotten a return. I haven't gotten a refund either. So that was, so anyway, that you have to be careful. Anything too good to be true. I have very rarely gotten any knockoffs. I mean, when I buy something, I kind of know that it's a cheap version or not a cheap version. But if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that there are now websites that sell Amazon return boxes, and I don't even think they open them. I think they do, what Alex is talking about. People at the shops, the various places, UPS stores and every place else, they have a box. People bring their stuff back, toss it in there, and then at some point it ends up as one of those closeout bundles online that people buy and then go through and figure out what they found. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Walt Palmer in Lewis, Delaware. And Walt asks, one of my announcers is getting hearing aids and has asked I create a Bluetooth connection for his devices. Can you recommend a transmitter with the lowest latency?
And Guy Cochran's going to help us out. Guy?
Yeah, I'd probably go with the Audinate version of their Bluetooth Dante adapter. It's about $324. Looks like this, and basically that's Ethernet and broadcast I/O, so in or out Bluetooth. That's an expensive solution, but it's probably the best if you want the best.
Yeah, I have a little experience with the inexpensive ones because I used to try to do a little bit of Bluetooth microphone plug-on transmitter to see if that would work. And in all cases, the latency was so annoying that I dumped it after one attempt at it. So even though that may seem like a lot, I would go with the better engineering if you want as low latency as possible. And as a former announcer who did a lot of announcing, latency can be a real problem if you're trying to do stuff live. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Zach Phillips in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And Zach asks, has anyone tried the OBSBot USB to HDMI converter with the Insta360 Link? And if so, can the Insta's controller still see and control the camera?
We had a discussion about this kind of in the time before the show where we were going through things. And by the way, you might want to tune in for some of that because it's a really interesting chat. And the bottom line was we do think there's a control thing in there. Alex, you had more notes?
I have, this is, so that's the Insta360 going through the OBSBot converter, and I cannot control it.
Okay. So
if I, I can't. Now, one thing I haven't tried yet is But that's the Insta360 going into my ATEM directly. So it is a USB camera that's going into there. The thing I haven't tested is I haven't gotten around to getting the little controller. So there's a little mini controller that OBSBot makes that may be able to send UVC commands to send this. And I realized when I put this together for this morning, I realized, I haven't tried that. So I'll order one of those and see if we can't get it to work. But it passes the video. It is very sensitive. I don't know what's sensitive, but something sensitive to the amount of power going into the way that the OBSBot handles power is cheap. So what I mean by that is, if I hooked it up to I have a 100-watt connection, on a USB-C because it has a power input. And the OBSBot didn't do anything, but when I clicked the link, it just went, oh, nope. So it's passing that it's not doing a graceful power delivery to the Insta360. So just know that. And so I plugged it into a cheaper, lower powered USB-C, and it worked fine. I do have the controller going in to I don't know what the controller actually does. I think that the USB control input is for their controller. It's not for a computer. So that's what I think happened there. So it doesn't appear that it can take those commands from the computer or connect. It's a real bummer because, man, I'd buy a lot of these I'd buy one with every one of my little Insta360s if it could control from the software, but the software can't see the Insta360. And I think the software is half of the product. It's the best camera control software ever made for a USB camera. And so I think that's half of what makes the Insta360 what it is. So anyway, it does work. It does pass video. It just doesn't let you control it. We'll ask again in about a week, and I'm ordering it today. I was prepping this morning and realized that I should order it. So
there you go. Next question.
Next question is from Steve Podmore in London. And Steve asks, hi, for podcast video studios, is it possible to use a fixed audio mics, MV7s, podcasters, etc., rather than ceiling mics through a Rodecaster or PodTrack to trigger PTZ presets for the video follows audio, going to the ATEM Mini Pro ISO or Extreme?
So there are systems out there that are set up for video follows audio, but I think you need more than just a simple solution. Alex, you have thoughts?
Yeah, you should be able to do that. So the main thing is it's not a matter of where the cameras are. You can definitely have fixed mics. It's just a matter of what this is, I believe, using the MixEffect Pro's video follows audio. And I believe that it has to be, you need to embed it in the cameras to have it jump from one to the next. I don't know if you can build a more robust system, but what this does is, for those of you who don't know what he's talking about there, is that it connects, it says, okay, well, if I hear video from this source, I'm going to go ahead and switch to that camera. And I haven't used it in MixEffect Pro. We've built complicated versions of this in the past where we didn't need it because it was going into a mixer and the mixer was outputting data and so on and so forth. And so but with this one, I believe it needs to be in those inputs. It shouldn't matter. You just have to embed it and you have to figure out how you're going to connect that mic. But whether it's a ceiling mic or a fixed mic, it should work just fine.
Yeah, I've also seen in these kind of automated systems where you're trying to do video follows audio, it's great in some circumstances, like where everybody is well behaved. If you get into those circumstances where you got three people on a panel and they're trying to talk over each other, the system can get confused and not know which camera needs to go to because it's getting three signals at the same time and it can't make up its mind. But the systems that work in the right cases. Yeah,
and this is where what we did was we actually passed it through a mixer so we could do an auto mix, because then it kind of made it clearer of what's actually happening there.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Next question.
Next question is from Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. And Guy asks, how does Create compare to OBS and vMix? And he has a link.
Oh, that's interesting. I just lost my screen. Who's up next?
Next, I'll go ahead and throw the ball to myself. Kind of intercepted from himself.
When you asked it, I was like, I hope Guy shows up for that. Guy asked the question before he was on the panel, and I was like, I hope Guy shows up.
Yeah, this is one where I was researching how to best bring Zoom participants into a broadcast, and there was a video engineering group question of the same, and a lot of people said that there was this company called QuickLink, which, if you remember the old NewTek Skype TX boxes that were like $7,000, they make something similar for the modern age. That one's a little long in the tooth, but they also have this really cool software called Create. So I downloaded it and started poking around, and this is what it looks like. It's kind of like OBS, but the cool thing about it is these inputs here can be SRT, they can be NDI, they can be Blackmagic. So I have a deck link in here, so I could make one of these buttons a deck link input. The crazy thing is that with my touch screen, I can touch any of these. So I could touch preview program, and it has the standard things where you can switch things around. But these are templates that are built in. So if you want to bring in somebody from Zoom, somebody from their Quick Link, somebody from Teams, you could have them all in here. And the crazy thing is that there's 48. So like I'm pressing this button here that gives me 48 inputs. And then there's another option that you could hit 96 inputs. So a pretty crazy piece of software. It is not free. So the difference between OBS and this software is that it does cost money. It's $60, same as vMix is $60. But this one, just for simplicity, it's pretty interesting. I think a lot of people here will enjoy some of the things that it does, like these. It has 48 multi-views. I mean, just the multi-views alone, being able to arrange 48 multi-views of a combination of SRTs, there's just so many possibilities. The settings and some of the videos that I've been watching. So here's where you could stream output to SRT or RTMP. You can choose your bit rate and you can record, and here's audio, video. There's also a lot of different hotkeys and automations that you can do. So it's I think somebody in our group is really going to love this. I don't know who, but you're welcome for me showing it to you. So go play, download if you have a PC and play on. For you Mac folks, I'm sorry. You might have to go, well, you can't put it on Parallels. It's too much of a resource hog, but fun to look at, fun to play
So
with.
it looks like an interesting solution. Hey, don't forget, your votes matter here. If you've been in the system for a while, you know that in the Makana system, people ask questions. Everybody is throwing questions at the show, but then the voting on the question, it determines what goes to the top and what we spend the most time on and answer in the most depth. So always your votes are very important. And if you want to get and take another look at the system and add more votes, that will make the show even better for everyone. Alex, you had another thought about that?
Yeah, and also make sure to ask questions as well. So you can vote on the questions, you can ask those questions all throughout the hour. And as far as the question here, I think that one of the things I'm interested in, and we're looking at Mimo for this as well, is the potential of being able to rebuild how we do the grid that we have. So could we have a piece of software that instead of running it through an MV16 and then just putting a mortise over top of it, could we build a more complex grid that could be 16, instead of just 16:9 for 16, 12, 13, 14, and have different settings for those based on who's there. So that's something that we're looking at across the board. So this could be an interesting solve for that.
Let's head off into the next question.
Next question is from Alexander Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia. And Alex asks, has anyone run into this Instagram issue? I post shorts every day, and suddenly I get a can't be invited as a collaborator when trying to bring a guest in. They checked their tagging permissions, and they're fine.
Interesting. And Alexander had raised his hand on his own question. Alexander, do you want to clarify things or add more?
Yeah, I just find the Instagram app has been very, very buggy lately. And this is one thing that I have not been able to resolve over the last couple of days, which is frustrating for my client and also for the guests that we want to collaborate on, because they can share the video on their own social stream, and we also get the data from that as well. So it's very peculiar. We've never had a problem in the past. He showed me screenshots of his settings. Everything looks fine there. I just don't have an explanation for it. I'm curious if anybody else has run into this.
Alex has some thoughts. Alex?
So allowing that tagging is someone approving they're approving to be tagged? Is that the...
Yeah, so you can invite somebody when you invite someone to collaborate on a video, they can share that post on their own stream, right? But your permissions have to be set up properly, because if you request approval for tagging, it means that if somebody tries to invite you, it won't work. But he sent me screenshots. Everything looks fine. Now, we went through every single possible privacy setting. His account is fully public, so it shouldn't be a problem.
So you're saying that they are tagged already. They're doing all those permissions are there and still not working.
It's still not, like I tap on the user's account and it's grayed out and it comes up with a message and it says, this person can't be invited as a collaborator, which is really odd.
But do you think it's a permissions thing on their end?
Well, that's what I thought at first, because actually I tried to select other people that we both follow each other, and I could actually select other accounts without a problem. So, but it's very, very odd because the permissions look correct, and then I started running into other weird bugs. Like I actually tried to boost a post, and then Instagram rejected the ad, and then I went to delete the post and I couldn't delete it. It just says something went wrong. Come back later. So,
yeah, it sounds like it could be in some kind of permissions issue. One of the things about it is a lot of times they're trying to protect VIPs and folks that are that might get invited into something they didn't want to be in, or something that they haven't set their permissions up. And so I know we've had issues in the past where, for a variety of reasons, you have to friend this account, or you have to. We've had issues for the last decade of these kind of collaboration tools. And they're usually there to protect someone who's an actor or a musician or someone that's well known in Instagram that couldn't, they don't want to just accidentally do it. They have to really think through it and go through the process to bring them in. So it's probably something you're going to have to find that they, what I would do is slowly get another account and slowly turn things up until it's available and figure out what those things are. And then it just has to be what you ask them to do. It might be that they have to post something, or they have to like you, or they have to, be connected in some way, shape, or form before they're able to do it. But that's been a problem across the board in many places. And they may have just tightened it up, because usually what happens is something bad happened, and then there was a meeting, and then they made a bunch of new rules. And so usually most of these organizations don't do it on purpose. They don't try to think out into the future. They just start putting things in, but then they start adding rules when someone does something horrible with it, or even just once someone does something that they can see where that could go wrong, a bunch of screws get tightened to make sure that they don't get themselves in trouble again or in the future.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from David Brady in New York. And David asks, OS X Ventura, when I'm in the office and hook up to an extended display, every so often the dock magically migrates to the extended display. Is there a way to lock it to a particular display and prevent this annoyance?
I'm not sure yet, but I wish you could find out, because I have this problem occasionally as well. Most of the time, the dock behaves just fine and it sits on the bottom of my laptop, which is where I want it. But occasionally, and I've got 3 monitors connected to this laptop, occasionally it will migrate to one of the other ones. The only way I can get it back easily is to go into the dock controller, specify a position, doesn't matter which one. If I say, right, and then go back to center, it comes back to my main monitor. But it's been vexing me for a little while, so I hope that they put in some way to lock it. Alex, do you have any other intelligence on it?
I have a lot of monitors. It's going to want to go to the far end. So whatever the far end is, so if it's probably, when it's magical, it's probably because the monitor has been laid out to the side of the side that has the dock. And if you lay out the monitor to the side that doesn't have the dock, it probably stays right where it's supposed to be. If you put it on the other side, it's going to go all the way to the end and put it there. And so I have mine on the bottom, and it doesn't move. so mine is set to the bottom of my dock, which has other issues related to some apps and so on and so forth. So I have to be careful. I do have it hiding, but you will find that it will always want to go to the far end. So probably the times it didn't happen was probably because you adjusted the monitor to be on the side opposite to where the dock is.
Interesting. All right. Well, hopefully that helps, David. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Zach Phillips in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And Zach asks, I just turned on an old monitor I got for free with a telecine. It appears to be completely unused as the plastic is still on the controller. When I turned it on, the color melted my face off. Wow, Zach, I feel bad. I hope the trip to the emergency room went okay. Anyone familiar with Adobe PR 4200? Pics in chat.
And Alex raised his hand. Alex, do you have any experience with this thing?
I have. I think that what he was talking about it's a very high nit. It's probably, at the time, I believe it was probably the brightest LCD made. And I don't remember what it was. In today's monitors, it probably wouldn't be considered the brightest monitor out there. I can't remember what it was, but I think it was 1500 or 2000 nits or something like that. I've actually seen Dolby makes a 4000 nit, and they actually make a 30,000 nit monitor that's a projector behind it, behind a transparency. I haven't seen that one, but I have seen the 4000. it's pretty bright. But finding a 4200, I just want to put in perspective that it's like finding a Corvette in a barn for the house that you just bought. Like you bought a house and you went to the barn and there's like a 63 Corvette that has a tarp over it with a bunch of hay and it's got like 40 miles on it is what it took to get home. I mean, that's what finding this monitor is like. So it's I think it's only 1080p, but it was, when it was sold, I believe it was $55,000 or $56,000 for this monitor. So it's a classic. And so I would definitely enjoy having the fact that you have this great monitor. I mean, there's a lot of monitors that at $5,000 or $10,000 today that probably do the same thing. It's not quite the same as a Corvette in that sense, but it is it's a great monitor, and hopefully you get to enjoy it.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Alexander Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia, and Alex asks, when using a polarizing filter to minimize glare, is there also a slight loss of light?
And the answer would be yes, there's going to be a slight loss of light. What polarizers do is they send us, it's essentially like a very microscopic Venetian blind. It tries to orient the light so that the light comes in a consistent kind of direction. The variable ND polarizers just use 2, and that's why if you move them in a circle, it'll completely shut things down. And that's very useful if you want to increase your aperture on a bright day or something like that. But each one of them is polarizing the light, and there will be some at least fractional loss. Alex, you had more thoughts?
Yeah, it's not just fractional loss. It'll actually change the nature of someone's skin. So I had one for a little while. I was using it in office hours, and I was very excited because I put some polarizing filters on the lights, and then I put them on the camera. And then I was really excited because I was able to get rid of any glare on my glasses because of that. But over time, I realized as I really compared it before and after, that it had a kind of a negative effect on how my skin looked. It is going to change that nature. So I think I would definitely consider a polarizing filter. NDs are fine, but I would consider a polarizing filter something you shoot nature with, not people. And I learned that the hard way.
I think that's sensible. Yeah. When you think about it, polarizing, one of the things you want is light coming from all directions to hit your skin. That's the purpose of a softbox, is to get light rays from a lot of different angles. So if you have a bump or some sort of blemish, that it fills in and creates no shadows. When you polarize it, it takes away one of those angles and would make that look a little more present. So that makes perfect sense to me. Alexander, you had another thought?
Yeah, I appreciate your input. That's one thing I noticed too. And being as someone who doesn't really know anything about polarizing filters, I know what they're supposed to do, but that was one of the first things I did notice was the color quality in my skin. My first reaction was, that does not look good.
It does not. It should not be done. So there you go.
It's great out when you've got clouds on a lakescape and you want the clouds to really stand out. Those filters work beautifully, but faces, not so much. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Marcelo Moyano in New Jersey. And Marcelo asks, today I saw the new DJI Ronin 4D Flex. Besides hurting our wallets, what do you think about this camera gimbal?
Alex?
Yeah, I watched it. I watched a couple reviews. My wife made me stop because I think the way the person was talking made her crazy. But it was a great review. There's like a 17-minute review about it. It is, so a lot of these cameras, it's pretty revolutionary. I'm kind of surprised they can do what they're doing with this camera. So what it basically does is the 4D is DJI's, it's their kind of gimbal system that has LiDAR and it has all kinds of follow focus, and it's an incredible all-in-one kit. And it's a pretty big, heavy kit. Like it's when you pick it up, and there's lots of ways people figure out how to support it. It's good for single shots. Doing something over a long period of time can be pretty arduous. And so what they have there is they took basically the optical block of that system and the stabilizer, and they allow you to separate it and build a cable that will go between the two. So it's a connector to it. Now we've seen this. The 950 that I have right there, the Sony 950, was one of the first cameras to do that, where you could pull the optical block out of it and put it. And what we did is we used that to put it on a motion control arm, so that you didn't have the weight of the camera on the motion control arm, and you could just put the head there with the lens. Most of the Cine Altas ever since then, that was 20 years ago or more than 20 years ago, all the Cine Altas since then have had that optical block removal. a lot of cameras just moved down to being basically the optical block. If you look at a Red camera, a lot of those are just the optical block as it is. So what this does is it takes all the machinery, the heavy stuff that it's using, and it lets you separate that out and then just have the stabilized head with it. It's exciting. I really want a 4D. I don't have a job that would pay for it yet. But it's an amazing looking camera system. If you really want to see a great one of the Ronin 40, check out Corridor Digital. They did a review where they really pushed it through its paces maybe a year ago or a year and a half ago, and it's a really great breakdown of what it can and can't do. And then just take that and realize you can separate that head from the body. And so if you watch the Corridor Digital one and then you watch some of the reviews that are of this piece, you'll fully understand what's possible.
Let's move to the next question.
Next question is from Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul asks, I watched a YouTube video about a guy creating websites with ChatGPT and Midjourney, and they were pretty fantastic looking with great copy and nav. It literally wrote the code. What will it take to start using this?
And we're going to start with John Pretto here. John?
This is an interesting story because Microsoft's been working with OpenAI for 5 years now, starting in 2018. Their first product was called Copilot, which is what they did is they built their model based upon GitHub. So all of the code in GitHub was scraped and put into the model, and that product now is built into VS Code. VS Code is the lightweight IDE from Microsoft that most of the coders are using these days. And the nice thing about that is you just write it what you want it to do in the comment sections of your code, and it will write all the code for you. Or you can write it directly in regular OpenAI. It will generate the code. It's easier to do it in VS Code. And that product was called Codex, and now it's called Copilot. But that was their first commercial product. They're currently getting sued by class action for all the code that they borrowed from GitHub, but super easy to do.
John Snyder.
Yeah, since we've been doing the show, I've been having ChatGPT try to make revisions on a website. I don't know very much about coding websites, and I was able to create a portfolio website that's responsive and has 6 images that, when laid out a certain size, show it in rows of 3, and a different size shows it as a single column. It's pretty interesting. It does. At some point, it realized that I was just changing the styles and just started giving me updated CSS, which is interesting that it figured out what I was trying to do and the correct parts to correct. What you want to do when you're working with ChatGPT is be highly specific and structured in your prompts. I really recommend having a persona saying, you are this, giving it a task, I want you to do this, and then specific instructions by doing that. The more specific you can get, the better, and you always need to verify everything and be extra cautious when it comes to URLs. ChatGPT is terrible at URLs.
John, that's interesting. So you're giving ChatGPT kind of a characterization, then you're talking to that characterization, and that's actually helping you clarify your prompts?
Yeah, because ChatGPT is searching the entire internet, basically, and if you want specific results, you need to give it a specific boundary that you want it to stay within. Otherwise, you'll just get that generic ChatGPT style that most people get.
That's an interesting attack, though, to make it personable and like you're talking to a person rather than you're just trying to formulate ideas to throw at it. That's fascinating. All right, let's go to the next question. Oops, you're muted, Ollie.
No, sorry, I just had a technical issue. Next question is from Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas, and Paul asks, how do you determine and measure the correct voltage, amperage, and wattage for charging different phones, Android phones, tablets, and laptops?
John Pretto's going to help us out. John?
If you watch Louis Rossman on YouTube or the other guy, Northridge Fix out of California, they both use the Maker Hawk USB meter, which plugs into the laptop, and then you plug the power supply into that unit. Maker Hawk doesn't make that one for the iPhone, but there's third-party companies in Amazon that makes this unit. It's super helpful for troubleshooting, and they're cheap. They're like $20. I haven't bought that one, but it's $20 on Amazon.
All right, that gives you some solutions. And don't forget, as we mentioned before, this is a great time to put questions in. We have a little room before the top of the hour, so make sure you do that and make sure that you vote on said questions so that we give the most time to the ones that have the most votes. That's the nature of what we do here. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from David Paskin in Miami, Florida. And David asks, has anyone used Video Ninja? What are the pros and cons?
Guy Cochran's going to help us. Guy?
Yeah, we were using it for a few months on Tony Mobley's show. And this is the benefit of having a show like that where in case of failure, there's not a whole lot of high stakes. So we had some issues with it. That was a few months ago. We since moved over to Zoom Rooms. The benefit at the time was the isolated audio. This was before Zoom Rooms did isolated audio. And also you could adjust the bit rate and crank it up. For those of you who don't know what the heck we're talking about, it's basically a way on the far end. So you input through a browser, so your camera joins and your audio joins in a browser like Chrome. And now on the other side, you could open up that URL and you have the image. So in a program like OBS or vMix, you can say add browser input and that video will appear. And it looks really nice. The bummer is that since it is free and peer-to-peer and WebRTC, there's not a lot of people working on it that have a lot at stake as far as monetary things. So this is where something like Stream Voodoo, where you pay for that and you get more stability and better quality. You can go 4K. Really, you could crank that bitrate up on that. So those are some of my thoughts on it.
Alexander?
Guys' thoughts are great. My experience has been very mixed, and I keep coming back to it every 6 months, and it does keep getting better. I just found it too fiddly. You know, I was looking for a free solution just because I do so few remote interviews. I resisted for a long time paying for Zoom, and I just ended up paying for a Zoom Pro account because it was just much easier and more reliable overall.
I had seen David Paskin raise his finger up, and now he's weighed in. David?
Yeah, no, I was when Guy said there's, not a lot of people working on it. There's one guy working on it named Steve. So he does that I know of. He does video.ninja. He does socialstream.ninja. And you're right. He does them all for free. And, it's kind of his passion project. This is all great information to know. Thank you.
Excellent. Let's move to the next question.
Next question is from Steve Podmore in London. And Steve asks, is there a video which explains the tech and how you create and produce Office Hours? And indeed, your cookery chutney episode. Amazing production level, fully supportive of the content.
Well, there's not only a thing there's a person who can explain it, which is Alex Lindsay, who has done that. So
we're gonna try to bring everybody on. We're gonna figure out a time to schedule everybody to come back on and talk a little bit about how Office Hours is running today, because it changes almost every week. There's an incredible team on the back end, a dev team, and it's long overdue to bring them back in. I think we're just working on a bunch of things right now. I think we want to finish before we bring the team back on. But incredible team on the back end that is constantly making things better from all over the world and working out things. And it's not just that Office Hours is getting built by this team. It's that we're pushing the envelope so far that we have to work with all the manufacturers of all the software to get things fixed. So we're way out on the bleeding edge of what's possible. And what that requires is us to work, to coordinate with Troicatronics and Zoom and Universe and all the things, and even to some degree, even some of the platforms to figure this stuff out and figure out how to make this work the best. You'll see us today. We're testing HDR. There's almost nobody doing HDR, and we'll be doing it every day relatively soon. But we're trying to work out some of the issues that are related to doing HDR to out to YouTube. If you watch the HDR stream on an OTT box, you'll see us experimenting with 5.1. So this team is really pushing this outer edge and really figuring out what's possible. The best way to learn how it works right now is to volunteer. So volunteer for the team, take on a TD position, it's the best way to learn anything, in my opinion. You can watch a video about it, but really the thing to do is to jump into it. And take on some of the roles, and not just once, but a couple times, and you'll learn how it works. The stuff is all available. We show everybody how to do it. We're not trying to hide anything. We want people to take what we're doing and think about how they would do it on their own using whatever software or hardware. We have a way that we've decided to do it. Eventually, I think that there's somewhere in the future that this will all be, this will be all software in the cloud. Like we won't, right now we're doing it with all very complicated hardware and we're cobbling together lots of pieces of software. What we're trying to do is we're taking what we have right now and building kind of a, prototype, for a different kind of show. And so we know that's what's happening. And I think that we're creating a new kind of content, where you have a bunch of experts that if you can get a bunch of them together and have them just answer questions, I think it's really compelling content. And I think a lot of people learn a lot from it. And so we're trying to figure out what that looks like. There's almost nothing here that you've seen that almost anybody else has ever done. I mean, if you look at the number of people in this panel, the panel that we do every day, and think about how many times have you seen that many people on a stage talking in unison and had it work? Not very often. So that's the thing that we're trying to figure out.
Good. Oh, David Paskin has a thought. David.
Yeah, and Steve, the production quality is incredibly high. Everything that I currently do, I've learned from Office Hours, and what I'm doing is 1/1000th, if not 1/1,000,000th of the level that Office Hours itself is at. And so my recommendation would be don't aim for Office Hours quality. Take from it, learn from it, build your own experience, your own quality, and there's nothing that Office Hours can't help us do better.
Yeah, amen to all of that. Alex, you had another last thought?
Yeah, and the goal is not that everyone will build it exactly the way we do it. It's just that exactly as David outlined, is that people will learn from the things that we're doing. We're trying to do things we're trying to constantly be cutting that front edge of, and opening up that canopy, so that roads can be built in front of it. And so we're at a different commitment. We're not saying that every show should look like this, but we are trying to figure out how to produce that perfect show and constantly trying to solve a problem that is unsolvable.
Absolutely. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. And Douglas asks, I've read in technical specifications for arenas and stadiums that they have specific space for trailers and cabling if a show is touring generators. Wouldn't most venues have a company switch and company power hookups for a touring show?
Yeah, there are a lot of touring acts at a lot of different levels doing a lot of different things. It is possible, but also remember there's a lot of money on the line for these shows. So the fact that there is shore power and that the company may be bringing in generators, they're not mutually exclusive. Sometimes you get problems. I was in a huge auditorium once and somebody hit a transformer in the neighborhood and the power went out. They would have had to refund all those ticket things if they hadn't had an alternative source of power able to be brought into the system so the show could go on. I have one other story, but let's let Alex weigh in on this before.
In today's shows, with the amount of AV, the amount of lighting, the amount of a lot of things that are happening in an arena or a stadium, the stadium and arena do not maintain enough power to do all of those things. It would be too expensive for them to do it because it would only be, they have something going on every day. So if you think about like an arena, you take an arena, let's say the Golden One Center in Sacramento, they have 3 days a week that they're doing basketball games throughout the winter. The other days, they're doing rodeos and they're doing concerts and they're doing all kinds of other things. Can they manage the day-to-day stuff, the basketball games? Absolutely. That's all built into it. But if you come in with a big LED wall and a bunch of cameras and lasers and all kinds of other things, they're not built to manage that because they're not doing that often enough to make it worth it. So it's easier for them to allow you to bring in your CAT generators and so on and so forth to power it up. But it's really common to augment getting what we call, it's not really called company power. We typically call it shore power. But getting shore power, there's usually a couple hundred amps that are available. 400 amps, 3-phase or something like that to do it. But that's enough to run a basic broadcast truck and a couple other things. But it's not enough to run a full Kiss concert, or something like that comes in. They have to bring their own power.
Speaking of that, I'm going to take you back to the 1970s. I was working in radio. I got comps to see Pink Floyd on their Dark Side of the Moon tour. They were in this venue, which is the ASU Activity Center, so not a small thing, and you would expect significant power. As we got closer to show date, it turns out they had to delay the concert. Why? Because they didn't have enough power in the building, and they had to run cabling from, and I'll go back to the picture, the lighting grid at the Sun Devils Stadium in order to bring in enough power to run the Dark Side of the Moon show. It was an amazing concert. I can see why they needed all that power, but Alex is exactly right. You can easily exceed even a large facility's capacity. So a touring show will understand that and have everything they need so they don't have to refund those tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars for that crowd. Next question.
Next question is from Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul asks, what countries lead in AI?
Let's start with John Pretto.
So, interestingly enough, DeepMind is out of the UK. Stability, which is stable diffusion, is also out of the UK. The US, obviously, most of the research is done here in the US. China and Russia, those 4 countries are leading the world right now.
There you go. Jesse Koester.
I just want to push back a little bit on this question. I feel like you're trying to enter the right building, but through the wrong door. What concepts are leading in AI? And when I say concepts, I mean what languages are going to reveal themselves to be the most powerful in this environment, and those will be the ones that are most published, that have the most written representation. And there are other concepts as well, but that's just a little pushback on the question.
David Paskin, thoughts?
I just wanted to throw out that I had not been on ChatGPT for a while, and I jumped back on yesterday, and boy, has it gotten smarter and a little has a little bit of an attitude. I put a prompt in, it gave me an answer. I put the same prompt in, and it essentially said, "I just told you the answer to that."
Whoa, AI with attitude. I'm going to wait for my first response of, forget about it.
You are wasting my time. You're wasting my time.
Interesting answers. Let's move to the next question.
Next question is from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. And Kenny asks, we learned months ago from Office Hours that many outdoor nighttime scenes for film and video are actually shot during the day. How is this best accomplished? Are there tricks in post to give a nighttime look?
Shooting day for night. Alex.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with obviously the overall values of the image, but also the reds and the blues. A lot of times you bring the blues up, you bring the reds down. Those are some of the things that you make those conversions relatively quickly, and that helps. That helps turn it. It is pretty mathematical. If you look at a lot of people now that sensors are getting better are actually shooting at night, and it does look a lot better. Like I will say that shooting at night. At night, for a night shot is way better than shooting during the day to do that. It always has this kind of fake look once you know what it looks like. But I will say that you can get into things where at least dark evening. There was a shot from Star Wars. It was funny because there was a shot in Star Wars where Darth Maul is coming out of Episode 1. If you watch this shot, and he's coming out of his ship that had just landed outside of Mos Eisley. And there's a shot, and we shot, I didn't shoot it. Somebody shot it during the day. I remember the artist, who remained nameless, was like, there's no way I can make this look like a night shot. Like, this is not going to work. He's sitting in After Effects, and John Knoll walks over and just goes, oh, you can totally do that. And he just goes, rip, rip, rip. He doesn't even experiment. Like, he just moves the red and green blue sliders over, and it's a night shot. And as John looked away, that artist just went, Command S. It's just like, I'm going to save that. I have no idea what he just did to that image. But so it's a pretty mathematical, but it was one of those moments that if I ever make a movie about Star Wars, that would be in it. But it's very, very quick. You can just change the channels and it'll look like a night shot.
Fenwick, comment?
The real bigger issue can be seen painfully in old 70s era TV shows, because they're clearly shooting. Listen, it's so bad. So they're clearly shooting out in the hills above Hollywood somewhere. And what you see, it'll look dark. The color hues will be, jacked up a little bit, like Alex just said. But look at all the shadows in the background. The trees are clearly throwing giant midday shadows.
It's the moon. It's the moon, Fenwick.
It really is amazing with the cameras of today that just go out and shoot at night. What was the it was a Tom Cruise movie, Collateral Damage, I think it was, where they shot it all super guerrilla and very.
It was very grainy back then. If you look at it, it's a really grainy film because they were shooting on film. Yeah. But nowadays, I mean, these sensors are getting so good that you really can't shoot at night.
Jesse Koester?
In defense of day for night, the nighttime sequence in Fury Road is gorgeous.
Okay, so it can be done, but the cinematographers who work at that level understand how to do it, and it's a pretty well-known process. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado. Since audio is so important in content creation, do any of you have specific storyboards for production of spatial audio?
Alex, you had a hand raised on this?
Not really. We don't really have a way that we do that. I think right now we still think about, when the storyboards, we think visually about what we're doing. A lot of times when you're doing that shot, you're bringing people onto the set that are going to pay attention to those things. So if you know that you have to capture some stuff spatially, you're going to have someone paying attention to what they're grabbing. A lot of spatial for film is all done in effects. So these are Foley. This is, in the United States, which is where a lot of spatial gets done, is the higher end films. The more expensive films in Europe and the United States, and a handful in India, most of what you hear in spatial for a film is really done in Foley, in effects, in mixing, in those types of things. It's not usually captured on set. And a lot of audio on set isn't even used, but definitely there's so much going on a set that capturing for spatial, they might capture some stuff for reference, but capturing for spatial on the set would be very, very hard. It might be done. I've never seen it actually done. Generally, we're just happy to get the mic. We're happy to get the people talking.
Next question.
Next question is from Eric Billings in Washington, D.C. And Eric asks, part of the spatial audio strategy seems to employ greater channel separation and delays for enhanced clarity. Does that provide a value add for accessibility applications, or is accessibility mostly about captions?
And Alex has an opinion.
We're talking a lot about this actually. For some things, we're thinking about how do we use this for accessibility. And one of the things you get into when you're doing dubbing. So this is accessibility as it relates to language, but it could also be other things. But one of the things when you have dubbing, the problem is if you overdub the person who is actually talking, you don't get to hear them. You don't get to hear their expression. You don't get to hear what they felt when they talked about it. And so one of the things that we've started to do some research on is the idea of putting the dub in one of the surround speakers. So you basically have the translator in your left, surround right or surround left, kind of whispering in your ear. Like they're like, this is what he's talking, this is what he's saying. And we got the idea actually, I was doing a job in the synod with the Pope, and he has a person the Pope has someone sitting next to him, like whispering Spanish into his ear the whole time. And I was like, what if we did that with surround? So anyway, so we're doing some experimentation with that. It'll be interesting to see if how that actually works. But stay tuned.
There you go. Next question.
Next question is from Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul asks, discuss how Video Pencil handles media and how it pulls from your photo video library on an iPad.
And David Paskin's going to help us. David?
Sure. We're going to get a little bit of the infinity here, but this is video. Oh, look, we didn't. That's probably because it's frozen. So this is Video Pencil on the iPad. Up at the top left, you've got a media button. And if you click on Pick from Photos, you can grab a photo, bring it in, zoom in, out. You can also X that out, come back, pick from files. You can choose any files here from iCloud or anything that's on your iPad or from Drive. It's pretty nice. And then it'll save recents right here. So if I bring this guy back in and then I wanted to draw on top of it, it would allow me to, which is really convenient.
That's a cute dog. All right. Anyway, that's beside the point. Let's thank you, David. Great explanation. Hope that gave you everything you wanted, Paul. Let's move to the next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas asks, there are rumors that Apple will be introducing a 15-inch MacBook Air. If you wanted a laptop that can handle more complex production tasks while still being portable and usable on public transport, would you get a 15-inch MacBook Air or a 14-inch MacBook Pro?
John Pretto.
This is a good question, and Nigel and I talk about the overlap in Apple's product lineup right now. This new 15-inch MacBook Air is getting good reviews in the press right now. It'd be a perfect upgrade for my wife from her 13 Intel, but it won't fit in her backpack.
Oh, dear. And then the fashion part of that is important. Chris Fenwick.
To Douglas, you just bought a computer. Stop shopping. So, no, seriously. If I can accomplish one thing here, Alex, in office hours, I implore people to shop less, create more. We have amazing tools. Douglas, you just bought a computer. You walked us through it for like several weeks. Like, what if I got this thing? Or should I get this much RAM or this? Go make your music. Stop shopping. Everybody, when you buy a new thing, when you buy a new car, stop driving through Auto Row. Like, just stop. Buy less, create more.
Guy Cochran.
Well, if you need the tools, you need the tools. I don't know if he has one currently that's powerful enough to do what he wants to do.
He does. He just bought it. We know that. We've been following him.
He bought a Mac Mini. He bought, he didn't buy a laptop yet. That's why he's asking. So
okay. I stand corrected. Go get a computer.
Go shopping. My recommendation would be if you need the ports, don't get a MacBook Air because you're suffering with just two. So that hurts. If you have peripherals to plug in on the road and you don't want to have dongles hanging off, especially if you're in a precarious position where that might get snagged. The other thing is I've showed it in the chat in Discord, the link to the 17-inch UPERFECT 4K monitor. And that thing plugged in it gives you amazing space on a small. So I have the 13-inch MacBook Pro previous, it's like Intel days. And man, it's a nice package. So I would take a look at that. And then you can always VPN into or use something like Jump Connect to connect to your big machine. So that's what I've been doing is I've been using Jump Connect to connect to my bigger machine, even though my MacBook's not as powerful as my new M2 Mac Mini.
Jesse Koester?
I'm going to pounce on that phrase complex production tasks and say that you should go for the Pro, not the Air, because as you get into higher demand applications, the heat dissipation really does make a difference between those computers.
I'm going to support what everybody said, including the fact that Guy gave you some practical things, but Chris also talked about what we sometimes call gear acquisition syndrome. It is possible, and I've seen a lot of people who have asked me for advice over the course of the years get into this process of paralysis by analysis. They're so focused on getting exactly the right thing in this complex thing that they don't pull the trigger and get the thing on their desk and start actually learning how to use it, which is the toughest part of this. And so the faster you get something in there, the quicker you learn all the tricks of actually getting your work done and out in the field. And sometimes that's, to me at least, way more important than whether or not that processor is a couple of extra megahertz faster than the one before it. You're right to make sure that the machine you're going to get does all the things you need it to do right now as best you can, but the next one will be better, and the current one still will do a great job if you've made a wise decision initially. So get the decision made. Let's move on. Oh, it's time. We've moved ourselves to the top of the hour here, which means that we are going to go into HDR realm. I think a lot of us on the panel have been both looking forward to and in great fear of the next hour. We're going to do a ruthless review of ourselves, but not as we normally appear in the coming office hours HDR realm, which means that you're probably going to see things exposed that none of us want you to see exposed, but that's okay. That'll be part of the fun of this. And I'm going to kind of first call on Alex, but then I think we're already getting, they're already putting into our process each person's shot. So we will go one by one through each panelist and do a ruthless review of how we look in HDR. So Alex, you want to give us any more what you're planning for this?
Basically, we're trying to figure out what looks good and what doesn't look good in HDR. Now I posted, this is HDR specific to YouTube is what we're looking at right now. So to kind of tell you what the pipeline is right currently is that we are going through, we're doing the whole show. It's still in SDR. The show itself then gets outputted through an FSHDR, and that FSHDR is, the FSHDR then converts it from, it's just a standard curve conversion from the SDR to PQ. So this is the PQ curve. And then that is sent out of the FSHDR into a elemental UHD link, which is capable of 10-bit as well as the HDR upload. So it basically pushes that, and it's capable of 16 channels of audio, 16 channels of audio. So we're sending 5.1 as well. So you may or may not get audio on we're still playing with that. But we did put, if you're using an iPhone, a newer iPhone and iPad, or if you have an HDR TV, you could open up the link that we put into the panel chat and also into the event chat to look at what we're doing here and see what's there. So, and the goal again is to kind of error correct. It's going to be hard for us to move anything while we're doing it, but it's mostly for us to just look at it through HDR and say, well, what could we do better, or what could we make look better, in that environment. And so we'll just go from person, because it's hard to tell, because some things look fine in SDR and don't look good, and sometimes things look dark, in Zoom and don't necessarily look dark, coming out. So I do think that generally a well-exposed image in SDR will look pretty good in HDR, but it can get a little overexposed at times if it clips. And we're going to figure some of those things out. So we're going, we'll answer your questions and kind of go back to your comments as well. So you can put comments or questions in to this. But what we're going to do is kind of go from person to person and just give the person some feedback related to that. So we'll start with, and this will be really short. It won't take us very long to go through this panel. So if you have questions about HDR, if you have questions about what we're doing, go ahead and throw those in. Otherwise, we'll have a short show. We'll have plenty of time to do other things. So let's go ahead and go to Jesse.
Jesse actually raised his hand for that discussion question, and he's also first in line here. So
go ahead, Jesse.
My question is, after we get the Ruthless review, will we have an opportunity to adjust settings on our pipeline and get re-reviewed, or is this one and done?
Yeah, if we have time, we'll go through everybody relatively quickly and give them feedback and see. And if they have time to make some adjustments, that's great. It's hard to adjust live because you're 20 seconds behind, so 20 to 30 seconds behind. So it's like you're kind of jerking around. So we can give you some feedback on it, but we're going to keep on doing this, and we'll start doing it for sections every day soon. I wanted to figure out a couple things on my end. It costs a lot more money to do this, so I want to make sure that I figured some stuff out on the back end before I started turning it on. But what we're going to start doing is typically turning it on in the pre-show. So we'll post it in there. So during the pre-show, I'm going to turn it on, and then I'm going to turn it off before the show itself. And that's mostly because I don't want to leave it on for 2 hours. We don't need to. We get all the information we need before the show. So we'll do it we're going to start broadcasting between 6:30 and probably 6:50 or 6:55 Pacific Standard Time. So not the pre-show where we actually talk about the questions, but when we're doing mic checks is a great time because we're locked on one person at a time. So there'll be a place to refer back to it. So it'll be less about correcting in real time and more about looking at it each day and saying, oh, I could do a little bit of this or I could do a little bit of that to make the adjustment. So let's go ahead and go to Jesse. I saw Jesse there go by in a second. And again, for those of you who can watch it, take a look at it. I actually think Jesse looks pretty good. Like I don't know if we the lights in the back look really nice. The gradient actually looks better than I expected. A lot of times gradients, because we're stretching it out, they sometimes look really posterized because we're going to that, but I don't see much of that in at least in what I'm looking at there. It is you definitely have kind of a more of a directional lighting, which is good there. But I think that actually it is. I don't know from a lighting perspective. I don't know how much I would change. I think that the skin tones look good. I think that a lot of those bits and pieces look good. I think it's a pretty good. So for those of you looking at it there, this is a pretty good set of exposure. Again, the lights and things bright back there do look nice. they look
on
nice
my iPhone, his key is probably higher than I would normally set it at. His key is maybe a stop and a half brighter than if I was looking at this as a shot.
Yeah, I'd keep it there mostly because in HDR I want to extend that a little bit. It snaps a little bit because of that. So I wouldn't pull back on that. I think it looks nice. I think Jesse looks great. So I think
Are you noticing that dark bubble around my head, and is that expected? That's why I keep wiggling back and forth because I want to see that
looks
bubble
like a shadow.
following. I'm not sure if it is. I'll do more testing to see if that's what it is. But the light's coming directly from this side, and there's no source that would put a shadow like that behind me.
Doesn't look like a shadow to me. It looks like a compression.
It could be compression. Here's what it could be is that it is putting more. It's a really interesting thing that now I see it. Now I can't stop seeing it. I think you weren't moving. Every time I glance down, I don't think you were moving that much. And now when you move back and forth, I can definitely see it there. Now you can see a little bit of posterization there. And this is going to be the challenge that we have when we're using 8-bit highly compressed WebRTC to go up. So probably what's happening is it's putting a lot more. It's probably putting a lot more detail into your face and then throwing data away because it's a little darker. So one thing about, a lot of compression is it's perceptual, so they say, well, it got darker. You're probably not going to pay attention to it. So we're going to throw it away. And probably what's happening there is that it's throwing that away and then we're stretching it a lot outside of it, the gamut that it was designed for. So what you may want to try to do is add another light behind you, just to fill that in a little bit more and see if it doesn't get into an area of brightness that makes that go away. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Should he be wearing a different color shirt than his background, Alex?
In general, I'd recommend some contrast there. Definitely. I mean, that's in a more general thing. Having a slightly different color shirt would make a difference. But I don't think that it's the end of the world in what we're doing. But I do think a slightly different color shirt.
Jesse, what are you using for those little highlights in the background there?
Those are LED strips that we have built into. They're basically footlights on little dot strips.
Wow, they look good. I can't believe that those are just little dots. Anyway, it looks nice. It looks nice. All right, let's go to Bill.
Here we go. Let's see how long it takes to switch to me if I talk. Hopefully, it will come to me at some point.
It'll slowly arrive.
It'll slowly arrive. I'll just keep talking until the system in the back end understands that it's time for me. Maybe they're patching things differently. I'm still seeing Jesse, but I'm going to keep talking.
It's not them. This is
Jesse's on the show.
Bill's not in the program. Yeah, Bill's not in the program. He's got to be.
I think I might be pinned right now.
But still.
Oh, wait, I see a
hey.
There we go.
There we go. Okay.
Now start your 20-second
exactly.
counter.
So Bill and Bill, you're using a 6K, is that right?
That's right. Blackmagic
and Jesse,
6K.
were you using a 6K as well?
Yeah, I'm on a Blackmagic 6K.
Okay. So it's still, but yeah, I think that it turned out Jesse's looks really nice there. And we're just waiting. We're going to just keep tapping.
I know. I'm waiting for it to show up on my phone.
I think it looks pretty good. There's something in general, about the correction of your camera. Are you using extended video or regular video as a LUT? Or what LUT, how are you LUTting?
I don't think, I've used some of the controls there, but I don't think I have ever applied a LUT that I know of.
Well, I think you want to try that.
Okay.
So what I would do is I would try to, it does have a kind of a feel that it is been just a film and you just pushed it really hard to get it to where it looks kind of normal.
Okay.
So, and I think that it shows up here a little bit more. It has kind of a painterly look to it. That is, and it's had that way. It just is kind of hard.
Hopefully Rembrandt, not Picasso.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking more Van Gogh. And so anyway, the late artist humor. So anyway,
Mark Rothko, no, none of the crazy people.
So anyway, try. What I would try is to look and see if you're passing the camera through a LUT, and if it is, I'd put it into a video LUT and see how that looks. You might end up with extended video to give you a little more edge, but take a look at that. But
Could we set up an appointment? Is there possible to do appointments?
Yeah, we'll do some more
after
labs.
Hours.
Yeah, we'll do some more labs.
We can walk through all the settings and make sure everything's right.
Yeah, let's look at the second half of next week. We'll do some labs, or a lab where people can just jump in and we'll push it through the system. It's a little hard. I have to figure out how to route that because it's all in office hours. It's easiest to do it in office hours because the whole thing is routed, but we can definitely do that after I have a production on. It will not be next week. It'll be the week after that because we have a couple productions next week. Okay, let's go ahead to John.
I'm a bad panelist. I didn't set up my real studio today.
Oh, John. I'm cutting your pay in half.
Again?
Again. Every time. Wow. So John is very bright.
Yes. This is a Brio.
Yeah. And it's
Next.
with no lights, zero light.
Yeah. Well, the thing is you definitely pop out and the monitors and everything else. I mean, it's just a very bright image because and a lot of it has to do with the windows behind you. Sometimes the windows work really well, but it would, jumping back and forth. I think it's not a bad image. It looks pretty good. It's just that it's
but it's also not a good image.
Chris is supposed to put ND filters on my windows.
Yeah, the ND filters on your windows would look great. Like it would definitely, because right now they're just a big solid white. So, but it definitely, you can see how HDR can make a difference. And this is where I think you're going to start seeing it when we go out with a backpack, with a LiveU or whatever, wandering around. You're going to see a big difference in how things look when we look at it in HDR.
How's the ViewSonic bird look on
Your
HD?
bird looks better than you do, John.
Yeah.
Good. And keep on remembering to ask questions and to make any comments that you want to make while we go through this, because we'll get to the other side of this and we'll talk a little bit more about it. And again, for it to go the whole time, we'll probably take some questions. Let's go to Harshid. And Harshid, did you have something to say while you were
Nope, I just did that for SuperSource.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, so we have Harshid in the shot here, and I think it's going to look pretty good. There we go. It looks good. You probably could get away with a little more key light to separate you out a little bit, but overall, I think that it is. It's still popping. It looks quite, nice. There's nothing about it that jumps out. You might be able to get just a touch more key light in there to bring you out a little bit from the background. But I think overall it looks good. It looks good.
I guess one comment would be, Mickey, if you took that note down, we need more key light, Mickey.
But just a little, like 10%. Next question, or next victim.
Oh, it's you, Alex.
Oh, here I am. Okay, here we go. And I think that I was playing with something that I don't think is going to, you'll see me change it, which is going to be interesting to see how this looks. I'm going to go ahead and change it. I turned my gamma up a lot, and I'm going to turn it down back to 0, and you'll see the adjustment happen while I'm on air, and we'll see what that actually looks like there. So while I'm there we go. So
what was the theory behind pushing the gamma earlier?
My monitor that I made, my main monitor that I look at is a little dark, and I realized that it all looks dark to me because I'm so used to looking at so much HDR that so you can see me bring it down. Oh, I think I still like it. See how I look a little bit more glassy now than I did before? So I want to bring it back up again so you can see it. So look at me now. Look at me now. And look at how you see a lot more of the highlights in my head, and it feels a little bit more oily. Now watch what happens when I bring up my gamma here. So this will take 20 seconds, but you'll see it. I'll wave because that means it's happened right after I did that. And I think that you're going to find that it may even out. Now maybe I lost a little too much black there, but yeah, you can see me wiping my head. So here, it's going to happen here in a second. So you'll see me pull up my midtones here. There's maybe too much. So did you see that gamma change?
Yeah, I did. I think the thing that bothers me, I'm guessing that shirt is black that you're wearing.
It is.
The microphone certainly is black, and it looks milky and not punchy. Like I'm
going to bring my blacks down.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring my highlights down a little bit too, and I'm going to bring the mid-tone down just a little bit. Let's see what happens here. So I've crushed my blacks a little bit, I've crushed the highs a little. I've just brought down my highlights just a little bit, but I've also moved my gamma down just a little in that process there. So you're going to see that happen here in a couple seconds.
Yeah.
There's the black. There's the white, and there's the.
It's so weird to watch it 20 seconds later.
Right. So now you can see it. Now I push those blacks down. Maybe a little too much.
No, I don't think so. I think it looks pretty good. That's where I'd put it.
Bring it up. The blacks are a little crushed there. Hold on. I can see the blacks are starting to posterize is the problem there. But I'm bringing those up just a touch, and then I'm going to I think my midtones look okay there, and bring this.
Out of curiosity, on the far right of camera right of your set piece back there, it is brighter than the center and the left. Why is that?
At the window.
Oh, really? It's a practical window that changes throughout the day?
Oh, yeah.
What exposure do you have? You have a Western exposure, Southern?
No, that's Northern, but it still gets super bright. And then there's this window that I haven't fixed yet that is there. But I think this is now. So what's funny is in Zoom, when I look up at it, it looks horrible. Like it definitely does not look good. I don't know what it looks like in the SDR version that goes out, but this is the challenge that we're kind of dealing with. I think this is probably the best looking as far as the HDR output, but I don't know on a daily basis whether it's the best looking on a regular SDR output. And so if you're watching this show later, you may see that we're correcting for something that may or may not be the best solution. So that's something to kind of consider as well. All right. Well, there's and it feels a little like it also feels like it might be just a little bit saturated. I did bump the saturation a little bit in the past, and so if I pull that back, I'm going to pull that back to center on that. So we'll wait for 20 seconds there, and then we'll go back to. So you'll see me, and I'll wave so I know that I've already been there. But that's so in looking at the SDR version that I had there. Oh, and we've already jumped to. So we won't look at me doing that right now. All right, so let's go ahead and go to John here. So John is up. I'm always surprised at how good it actually looks. Like it's actually working pretty well. I think that there's something. What is the bright thing that's kind of hanging in your bookshelf? Is that? It's
a little light bulb there. Okay. It's a floating light bulb. I was hoping it would come out better than it actually does. You can just see the filament.
Yeah, this is where if we had actual HDR delivery, this would look better. So right now what's happening is it's SDR, it's then compressed, and it's sent over, and then it's uncompressed, and then it's scaled up, and what you end up with is just a little dot that's there. I think that overall it looks pretty good. You probably could get away with a little bit more key light if you wanted to, but I think it looks fine. And there's nothing that looks too dark or anything else there as far as that goes. So it's
yeah, I used to have the purple, and it was way bright in the HDR, and I kind of got lost in it. So I was trying this blue. I've been trying this blue instead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's go to the next one. Guy, I will admit that Guy always looks really good in HDR. Whatever Guy's doing generally works. When I'm doing tests in the background, I'm always like, oh, Guy's shot. Now, what camera are you using, Guy?
This is a Zcam E2C, I believe it is.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah, it's about a $2,000 Micro Four Thirds camera, and it does have some ability to do HDR, but I'm not enabling anything right now. I mean, it's just a regular output.
No, I think it looks great. The blue is a lot bluer. That's typically the thing. And one of the things that you see here is the blue light that you have over your shoulder, the big blue light, it's peaking. So you can see it flatten out right around the where the painting is. It probably did it. We don't see it in SDR. It probably did it in SDR. It probably hit not all of the exposure, but I bet you if you look at your, it's not you. It's that background there. But I bet you that if you open up scopes on your image, you will see the blue channel is going over 100. Like it's clipping just the blue channel. There it is. Yep, you can see it. So that's why that blue is flattening out in that one area, is that the blue that blue. It's not clipping like a white clip. It's just the one channel clipping, and it's kind of flattening out. So I might try to pull that light back just a little bit. And because it's the problem with the HDR is that it's much more noticeable because it probably looks fine in SDR, but what happens immediately is that the HDR is stretching everything out. So suddenly things that were minor in SDR look more, you see them a lot more in HDR. But otherwise, I think it looks great. I feel like you have more fill in there in the background than you had before. Do you have more lighting back there now?
As far as bring up just the ambient level of the, yeah, there is because, well, there's daylight creeping in right now. And then I've been moving around my key light a little bit. But I mean, do you notice it if I turn off the key light?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the it did look a little better without as much ambient light in the room in the past, just because it separated you out more. You don't want
to talk to God about that. Hey,
yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
Can you turn it down over there a little bit.
Get the gaffer in the sky to back up a little bit. Anyway, yeah. So I think, but otherwise, it looks great. It looks great. Let's go to Alexander Knight. In the past, when we've done tests, Alexander has also looked really good. I know that because a lot of times I'm in the background kind of throwing these things on. And I do think that, Guy, I'm 20 seconds behind, but I do think when you turn off that key, the background, those, especially the little lights that are hanging down, pop out a lot more with that. But again, it looks great in HDR. So it's good. Here's Alexander. Alexander looks great. It's funny so what's interesting about that is the lighting that Alexander has behind him, I think, really works. Like it's like in HDR, it's very pleasing as far as and so this is kind of why we want to do some of these tests, is because we kind of have to figure out, like, why does John's not pop out but Alexander's does, but his lighting is not. Maybe it's just the brightness, but his lighting is not. They are clipping at one end there, but the on air and the lights right behind his head. I might try to bring down that little cluster that's a little brighter. Could come down just a touch, to not because it's clipping. But outside of that, I think it pops really nicely. I tend to go towards. I think this looks great. I tend to go towards cooler colors behind me, obviously, than warmer colors. Mostly because it makes me it tends to be good for your skin. Like you tend to look better with not being compared to a warm color, and so that's how I tend to kind of go down that path. But I think overall, I think it looks great, and I think again what we're learning there from Alex's is that those lights, when they work really, really well. It's just a matter of figuring that out, and that's what we're trying to. That's one of the reasons we're doing these Ruthless reviews, and why we're going to keep on doing these tests, is to figure out, what's nice about this, and what do we want to try to emulate. I don't want everybody to have lights behind them either. Like, we don't want to be all wearing a blue striped shirt, but we want to look at what things might make a difference that we can kind of personalize. Go ahead, Alexander.
Yeah, which light did you say was clipping? Is it the Parcan that's kind of on top of the bass trap that I have back there?
It is it's the one that's in your frame. There's a cluster of them that is not that bright, and a cluster that's brighter. I don't know what that is, but that's the one that is the brighter, smaller cluster over your shoulder, over your left shoulder, is the one that is that could probably come down just a touch, and it would not clip out. Now we're going to jump to Chris, and we got Chris up here. And Chris's looks good. It looks really good. I don't see a lot of posterization the way can you rock your head back and forth, Chris? We'll see if you see the same thing. So interesting.
Do the Ray Charles.
Yeah, do the Ray Charles. I don't see the same thing. So I do think that this is what we're learning, is that Jesse's was a compression artifact with a darker background. Chris has a little bit more light behind him, and as a result, it's deeper. It's in the more of the center of the compression algorithm, because the compression is throwing away dark areas, thinking you're not going to see them, and then when we stretch them out, you see them. So I think that with that kind of slightly lighter background behind him, you're getting into something where the compression algorithm considers it more important and doesn't throw it away. So I think that I wouldn't change anything there. Looks great. You might be able to. No, I wouldn't change it. It's good. It's good. Other than putting little Christmas lights back there.
No, I'm not going to do Christmas lights because it. But for the record, the lighting is a cheap, soft thing over there, like a roll up, a Elgato key light, which today is not being controlled by the computer because it didn't want to work, and then a couple of Philips Hues is doing the ice blue in the background, and very side lit, which I realize sometimes. I think my eyes are either deep set or maybe, and they're pretty low, but sometimes my eyes don't get a lot of light. I will say, Alex, I am continually thoroughly impressed with the lighting of your glasses. You could do a whole class on how to light for glasses. and you should sell it for like $79.95 to every gaffer in the.
But it would only take like 5 minutes for me to sell how to do glasses.
Well, then you need to be better at stretching that stuff out.
Video. Yeah. Like, let me talk really slow or just put it in. Yeah, there's no filter on it right now. It's just, it really is just angle of incidence equals angle of reflection. I mean, that's the only trick to
yeah, but glasses. Here's the thing though. You move your head a fair amount, right? And I never lose your eyes. I never lose your eyes. It's really like, I wish it's really good. It's fantastic.
Okay, well, thanks. I don't know. I mean, I fiddle with it a lot. Like when I set it up, there's a lot of me sitting down looking at my glasses and then going back up. I mean, my glasses probably drive half of my lighting. So I do agree that that's the issue. But the problem is simple. It's the quality of whatever tools I have to fix it is the thing that usually is the thing that I have to worry about. Like right now I'm using the MakerPipe stuff, but I didn't really use it the way it could be used. I ordered hinges. I couldn't find them. They're in some box. And so I kind of had to do it in kind of a weird way. And so it took a long time to do it. But normally if it's just swings, you can kind of figure that out relatively quickly. But yeah, so maybe we'll do a lab at some point about glasses. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Oh, that's me. Sorry. Next question is we'll hand it back to Bill here. The first question is from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. And he says, Andy asks, can you describe the HDR live streaming signal chain? How do you maintain HDR? Thanks.
And I think that's for you, Alex. So do you want to take it through?
I talked about it a little bit earlier, but what happens is that we're just getting standard dynamic range out of the panelists, and that's going to go out. Now, what it does do is we're not showing that today, but what we do have is it goes right out of, so Zoom ISO delivers all of those to a router, and then we go directly out of that router into 4 FSHDRs. And then those FSHDRs go out and into the switcher. So we actually, in the middle of this, have the ability to color correct each person. So that's the next step that we're kind of pushing through. We're pretty close now, but if we want to adjust things a little bit back and forth and move people around, we can actually do that in the FSHDRs. So that process is already in the pipeline now, but we're still organizing SDR there. Then we send the entire program of the switcher out to another FSHDR, and that one converts from a SDR to an HDR. So it applies a PQ curve or a LUT that goes from SDR to HDR. And then I have a lot of controls. I have some black controls, black gamma gain, so lift gamma gain. I have HDR amount. I have a lot of other things that are all built into the color front solution inside of the FSHDR to do overall correction to everyone. Now, this is not the place we want to be in the future. What we really want to do is convert. The problem we really have is delineating what's actually happening in the ATEM. But what we want to do is get to a point where the ATEM is being delivered HDR, assuming that the ATEM stays in HDR. And so we would take all those people that are going through those FSHDRs and convert them all to HDR there. Then we would build an HDR show and then use an FSHDR to go back down to SDR where we can control the LUT and send that stream out to YouTube. If you look at this HDR link, which we put into the event chat and into the panel chat, in a regular monitor, we probably look a little overexposed. That means that YouTube is not properly, converting us from HDR to SDR, and that's something we're working on. So right now, what we need to do is do our own SDR, and we may want to do our own SDR build either way, but that's what we're working on there, is to get that correction back. Now, the advantage of doing all of it into the as HDR into the switcher is that when we have a third party, when we have something else, like we want to have a live camera through a LiveU or a live camera from our set or playback, all of that could be living in HDR and played out to HDR. So we're not going from SDR to HDR. That could just be HDR content that we're playing out. and it will look amazing. The goal is to have the panelists look good, as good as we can make them with SDR, and then be able to have the output, that we're have the output of anything else we put in that might be HDR content, whether it's playback. And this gets back into the same thing with the audio, is that we could have audio going out at if we had audio in 5.1, the whole show may be going through the center speaker, or maybe a little bit splayed out, but the 5.1 will sound amazing and go around us, and we can experiment with things. So we're still working on all of those bits and pieces. Next question.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Or do you want to flip? Would it be easier since you're going to be answering a lot?
I'm not used to this. This is very complicated for me.
No,
anyway, so I'll go. So Guy Cochran asks, besides the LiveU, what kind of encoder could we push to HDR into the OH system remotely?
And we'll have to go to Alex for.
I know, I might answer a couple of these. What it needs to have primarily is 10-bit. So 10-bit is the big thing that we need to have. We can figure out a way around a lot of other things, but we need more bits, and preferably we want to be capturing at that. It doesn't have to be 444. People always ask that, but it can be it can be nicer in some cases to be 444 if it's a lot of saturated colors. But otherwise, the 10-bit is the thing that's really important as far as a delivery output. Of course, we want to be able to. What we're looking at also is, do we want to convert from log to because it might be easier for a lot of pipelines to use either HLG or log to make those corrections, and so that's another thing for us to kind of consider down that path. So I don't know of many. The Streambox is another. I think it's a 12-bit delivery tool. So Streambox is one way that we could be sending HDR content to us. We haven't tested that heavily yet, but that's another way to do it. And then of course a lot of camera systems that are local. But as far as remote camera systems, if we don't care about latency, the other thing is that we have the Blackmagic UHD has the ability to do that 10-bit, so we can actually pass it. Pass that information to it. So that's another way we could do that, but we'll have latency. We'll have 5 seconds of latency to get in there. So if you want to cut to something or show something or pass something through, that might work. But there are pretty limited options right now to getting this out right now. That's the only way we can figure it out and push for more of it, is to do it.
It probably makes sense for us to swap. So let me read the next question, and then you'll answer it. We're moving to Andy Kokendorfer, VR Florida. Jesse's image looks awesome in HDR. Is a darker background better for HDR?
Well, I think that we saw that Jesse's image looks good, but that darker, it was a little too dark, and the compression started to throw stuff away. So I think that maybe a little darker looks good with some contrast, but probably not a lot darker. And what happens is that data's getting thrown away. I don't know. I think Jesse's going to move back and forth again here. We're 20 seconds behind. I think he already did that. But I see less of it now. Did you bring up the light a little bit there, Jesse? Yeah, you did. Yeah. So it's still see a little bit of it. There's a little bit of a compression shadow. It's really interesting that's going on back there. I still think that there might be a little bit of a shadow that's just being accentuated, in that process that we just don't see normally. But when we extend it, we see it. Next question.
Next one comes from Alexander Knight in Vancouver. What is the minimum investment required to have an HDR live stream versus pre-recorded and uploaded later to YouTube?
It's just a matter of how you're going to deliver it to YouTube's in HDR. So you need something that's going to be able to do it has to be able to do the 10-bit compression. You need to be able to stream it via HLS. So you can't. We are streaming to YouTube using the HLS format rather than RTMP. So there's a way that you can do that. So you can set your receive on YouTube to HLS instead of RTMP, and then you can send up the HEVC encode that's going to take that 10-bit data and send it to YouTube. So that is a piece of the puzzle that you have to kind of that you have to put together there. So so something that can an encoder. I believe that OBS now has an HDR. So you don't with OBS. I don't even think you need HLS. I don't think you need an HLS encoder. I believe that OBS just supports it. Like you can just say I want to do HDR to YouTube, and it's application level connection there. So take a look at that. There might be a couple other ones that do the same thing, but take a look at that. Go ahead, Alexander.
So are you saying hypothetically with OBS, I could just use my existing infrastructure, like my ATEM switcher, to pipe that into OBS and then use OBS as the final?
Yeah, I don't know I don't know if the minis really handle HDR very well, as far as what they're passing through. But you might be able to do it all in log. But at some point you're gonna have to apply a LUT somewhere, and I don't know enough about OBS to know what LUTs could be applied. But OBS on its own should be capable. There should be a setting there in OBS and a couple other apps, but OBS and maybe Wirecast that have an HDR output setting to YouTube. So, and YouTube, I know YouTube engineering has been working with them on that to make sure that it was available to folks. So take a look at that and let us know what you find out on the OBS side. Next question.
Guy Cochran, Seattle. If we do a 4K 60p HDR pre-record, do we have the infrastructure to play it back live into the show?
We will by next week. so technically, yes, we have it. 090 has the ability to do that, and we can use that right now. But when we're in production, it gets taken away from us, and so we have to build a better solve for that. So we've worked in the past with Softron. Softron actually, we may be connected to why Softron has 10-bit output, or other things that I know is done. So the Softrons, they're on the air has a 10-bit output, as well as many channels via Dante to output. So our ability to send out 5.1 in HDR from Softron is there. So we can absolutely play it back. We could technically play it back with the HyperDex. The HyperDex can be, because it'll just play out whatever it has in there. But we have had, some issues with HyperDex doing that. And it's been a little bit. It sometimes hasn't been a great experience to use them as an HDR playback, and so we've really moved towards using the Softron as an output for the last year and a half, and been pretty successful with it. But that's the only one. That's the only software playback on the Mac that I know of that will do 10-bit output. It's definitely a request that we've logged with other playback systems that we've used, like QLab and so on and so forth. They just don't support it quite yet, and so Softron has been the one that we used. And I think they are going to graciously get us a copy of it. It's not cheap, and I'm getting a new Mac Mini for us to just use for playback as we get a little closer. So we had to move some stuff around financially to do that, but we're gonna do that this week or next week. And it takes not just the Mac Mini; it's a Mac Mini with a Sonnet box with a card, and there's all those pieces so that I can push the SDI output. Next question.
Alexander Knight, Vancouver, British Columbia. What does the HDR to SDR mapping process look like? Is it possible to totally optimize and make the SDR feed look normal without impacting how the HDR feed looks?
I have never seen the SDR look identical to the original SDR. That's been something when it goes up to HDR and it comes back down. It's not quite the same, but I find it to be very acceptable, as we go through that. So I think it'll be okay. But I do think that I think it'll be good. I mean, what we do here is so absurd that I don't think anyone's going to notice on a day-to-day basis between our conversion of SDR. And there are some opportunities to make it a little bit better in some cases, but it doesn't look exactly the same. So I don't think it necessarily looks worse; just looks different than when the original one went up. Next question.
Jonas Dottel in Stuttgart, Germany says, Alex, have you tried using OBS for streaming HDR to YouTube to save some cost while experimenting?
I haven't, and a lot of that has to do with what I have to do next, which is that I have to, there's some other things we're going to do with this format, and so I'm kind of thinking down the road there. We probably could. I'm not a super, I feel like I'd have to get spend some money on a PC, which I'm not that excited about. It's not a general purpose computer for me. Because I don't think I would trust the Mac to, start running through that. And right now I will admit that the configuration, there's a lot of tools. So by building the pipeline into the Elemental cloud, I have the option to not only go HDR 10 and 5.1 to YouTube, I have the option to going Atmos and Vision to an HLS player. So my interests of where we're going to go next after this means I want to be able to know that I can do go to the Vision and Atmos conversion at the same time. So there's a slightly more complex thing that I'm kind of prepping for That's why I'm exercising that process. And I'm trying to build the pipeline for where I want to get to. and I have the scars from OBS in my back are so deep that opening it makes me twitch a little bit. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Is there a preferred lighting temperature color combo for HDR? Black seems problematic.
I think darker seems problematic. I mean, I think that the reason that we're seeing that in some of the dark areas is because it's just a general compression that's happening, and we don't notice it in SDR because a lot of compression is perceptual. It's deciding you're not going to see this, so I'm going to throw it away. And then when we take it into HDR, we're stretching it back out. We're seeing all the things that we weren't supposed to see. So I think that's really the issue. I think a lot of what's really interesting is that a lot of times black, when we're actually playing out HDR content into the HDR stream without going through all the SDR and compression and everything else, you're going to find that the blacks look amazing. I mean, that's part of what makes HDR look amazing is the detail in the blacks. And you can have shadows that have tons and tons of detail in them that you wouldn't normally see. So next question.
Next one comes from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. More bokeh or less bokeh? Is there a preferred look for Office Hours panelists?
I think overall, the more bokeh or the softer background looks nicer. I don't think that's as necessarily an HDR thing, but I think that it can get too soft. I think I'm on the outer edge of being too soft for a variety of reasons. But I think that I think that it's overall. I think it looks nice. It helps bring that foreground person, the subject out. Go ahead, Bill.
I think for most shots, it looks really great. The one exception I have is like with Alexander, who has text in his frame, the on-air thing. That always confuses me because with the bokeh, which looks beautifully on his twinkle lights, it's making that impossible to read, and it distracts me because I'm trying to read it because I can see that it's letters. But that's the only circumstance that bokeh bothers me.
He's making you work. He's just making you work.
Making me work harder.
It's the box inside of the box. Anyway, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was thinking that the on in Alexander's shot actually reads almost like CNN. Alex, what is the Lindsay, what is the f-stop of your lens?
I would have to go back and read it. ATEM doesn't tell you what it is, but it's probably in the less than 2. So
you can read it off the app, the phone app.
Tell you. Oh, the phone app. Oh, I don't have the phone app open right now.
Well, that's it. I'm sorry for you.
I'm viewing our show right now through HDR. I can't multitask. That's too much. But yeah, it's probably 2 or 1.8 or something like that.
Okay.
Next question.
Alexander Knight, Vancouver again. Why are we converting from 30 to 60 frames per second? That's what YouTube is reporting on the HDR feed.
Yes. Again, we're throwing the ball to where the receiver is going to be, not where the receiver is right now. So when we deliver footage, if we are able to get our hands on the LU800 from LiveU, and when we deliver playback footage and we deliver footage from the set, we'll be delivering that at 60 frames a second. And so that, what we need to do is have a pipeline that's designed for 60, and then we're still coming at 30, and that's going to be the limitation of what we have here. But I think when we're moving around and talking, I think 30 is probably okay. But one of the things that we found is that for a lot of footage, especially kind of handheld and everything else, it's a lot less framey and a lot more immediate. It will feel more like you're there. So as you increase that frame rate, the more visceral the video feels. Filmmakers don't like that. They want to have it 24, and that's fine. And there's a bunch of reasons for that are good. If you get the frame rate, 60 is fine. When you go over about 95 frames a second, your brain starts to move away from thinking of it as video and starts to think of it as just a window. And then you can create disorientation, seasickness, all kinds of other things when you start doing heavy camera moves in high frame rates. But we're not dealing with that here. But you're going to find that as we start to stream these things and they're 60, you're going to feel more like you're there, And so, but our footage will be stuck at 30. And again, these are baby steps, but when we start to do more 60, when you get used to 60 frames a second, it's really hard to go back to 30 or 24 because when you're doing live streaming, I'm sure film is fine, but when you're doing live streaming, the 60 feels a lot more like you're there. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, when you're converting from 30 to 60, is there any perceptible difference in terms of the motion? Can you see a difference at all? I mean, obviously we're not moving
more
around
bandwidth,
much, but
it's more bandwidth. So if you don't have enough bandwidth to support it, it might feel a little less. But that's the that's the process there. Yeah. So otherwise it should look exactly the same. There's a chance for it to be a little more choppy if you start dropping frames because your cadence isn't correct. But in general, if you're getting all the frames, the 30 and the 60 should look the same. That's exactly what happened if you look at Avatar is not switching from 24 to 48. It's doubling 24 and then streaming 48 when it's 48. So that's how that, so it's always 48 when you're watching it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, would there be any portable monitors like the UPERFECT range that can handle HDR?
Go ahead, Guy.
That would be the model that I have here in my hand. This is the HDR version of the 17-inch. It's not cheap. It's $699. The nice thing is that it has VESA mounts on the back, and it's super thin, and you can power it either from the MacBook or you can power it with a USB-C battery brick. And I did just try to hook up from my phone to see if I can pipe HDR into it with a little Apple dongle, but didn't have enough oomph, so it just made it black. So that doesn't work.
Well, and also the YouTube player won't know what to do with it on a mobile device, so you'd have to plug it into an Apple TV. The Apple TV will have the right flag, and it'll know what to do with it, where the phone won't.
What about an iPad?
I don't think it's just OT. I believe all of this will eventually be supported, but I think that if you try to output, I don't think that. I don't know. We'd have to test it. And one of the things, we are really working on getting some more tests. One of the next things you're going to start seeing us do is do some tests when we get that playback system in. Is do some playback where we're playing out known HDR footage so that we can see, and then we can do some of those tests and see if it works. So stay tuned for that. Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, on that UPERFECT monitor, Guy, are you happy with the overall brightness? I mean, in a well-lit studio environment like yours, can you see that display okay?
It's okay. I mean, I think it says it's 500 nits HDR. So, I mean, it's okay. It's not super bright. It's not 1,000, but for what it is, it's nice.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Would you agree that our eyeballs and processing in our brain is actually the highest of dynamic ranges? Having been in light cueing sessions all week, I've been thinking about this.
Go ahead, John.
For human perception, yes, but there are lots of animals that can see significantly more color and brightness than humans can.
Yeah, the thing to note is we talk a lot about nits. I went to a great demo at Dolby, and they were kind of. It's amazing how quickly we can adjust to things. So they were showing us 100 nits, which is standard dynamic range, and then they were showing us 1,000, and wow, the 1,000 looks really, really bright. And so we got used to this going back and forth. They're really deceptive. They go back and forth between 100 and 1,000, 100 and 1,000, and then they went from 1,000 to 4,000, and suddenly it just looked like a different image from the 4,000, and the 100 nits look like mud, And what that really shows is how quickly our eyes start to adjust to whatever they're there. And now people will say, "Oh, you can't look at a 4,000 nit monitor," or earlier the colors off your face or whatever. But one of the things that when you start taking a light sampler and you point at things, you can look through a little target and point at it. And one of the things they showed was an image of, you're standing in an alley and you're looking at the wall. That wall is 9,000 nits. It's not, and that's not even direct sunlight. And so the thing is that what's problematic is when it's a dark area and you're seeing a little window of it is 4,000 nits or 1,000 nits, and that's in monitors. Having a lot of contrast can have your eyes open up to get the overall and be pulling in huge amounts of light. But if the ambient is high enough, then you tend to be able to we're able to handle a lot because we have these great ways to change the aperture in our eyes. Go ahead, Chris.
I find it interesting that apps like, actually, it might be just Instagram, choose to ignore your brightness setting on my phone when it hits something that's HDR.
Yeah,
like I can have it turned way down so it's like easy to watch at night, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, we don't care what you have your phone set to. We're going to give you a window to the sun.
Well, and that's because otherwise people are like, why does this look like, I took this in HDR, why does it look so bad? That's the other side of that. Yeah.
Yeah, but myself as the viewer,
Right.
like I've set the device to a thing, and Instagram just like, yeah, no, we don't care. We don't care. We're going to give you give you both barrels.
It might actually be done from the Apple, because the photos will do the same thing. If you look at an HDR, if you look through images that were taken by your iPhone and you get to an HDR, because most of the time it's shooting HDR, it'll automatically pop to the brightest thing that it needs to show it to you, no matter what. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think the eye-brain connection is the best thing for content that is designed for human beings to watch. Everybody's a little bit different in how they perceive it. But yeah, as other people have mentioned, there's things outside of that. I remember my early days of doing a lot of narration work for the McDonnell Douglas Helicopter Company when they were bringing in the early FLIR battlefield things and we saw heat for the first time. I was amazed at that and realized there are limitations to every system. So it's a process of getting something that is the correct thing to monitor what you're trying to do.
Next question.
Next one comes from Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas. Where does Zoom tell you that you're watching in HDR? On YouTube?
Zoom doesn't know. Zoom is just passing us SDR, and then we're moving into HDR. Next question.
Next question comes from Chris Wider in Lafayette, Indiana. Other than using a client like Larix, how could we do direct HDR feeds for the show?
Well, we could theoretically, we're talking about this a little bit. We could do some curves where we deliver everything. We do the PQ curve without any of the metadata and pass it to each other. We can't do this in Zoom right now because it doesn't do 10-bit. So if we did this kind of clamped down version of ourselves and sent it to, we would need 10-bit at least to get it to us to extend that. There may be other tools that we could use, but right now Zoom doesn't have a 10-bit solution. So that would be, we wouldn't be able to do it through Zoom to do those feeds. As far as delivering those, again, if you have a 10-bit output, we can theoretically clamp it and send it out in something that looks like, it just looks, you're clamping that down, sending it out, and then bringing it and opening it back up again. But you need the bit depth, either 10 or 12 bit to do that. So again, things like Streambox and other things could possibly do that. But without 10-bit delivery, you just don't have enough to describe it. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Jesse Koester in Glendale. Do we have rough numbers on where we should be sitting on our waveform scopes? I imagine there's a sweet spot for blacks, face, and highlights.
Right now, we're finding that mostly a well-exposed image is what works when we're just taking the SDR to HDR conversion. Again, there may be a time when we apply the curve ahead of time. This might be an experiment we do in the future, which is that, hey, what if we put the PQ curve on the delivery and then stretch it back out again? But I think that if we did that right now with 8-bit and compressed, it would just look all beat up. So right now, it's just making sure that your highlights are right at near 100 and your blacks are right near black. And then you can play a little bit with those midtones. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says, could mimoLive send out an HDR stream?
Not that I know of. Not yet. So I think that's still something that maybe is in the works. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle. If we later rewatch the HDR feed on an Apple TV 4K on an HDR-capable display, will it still be as accurate as the live feed?
Yeah, you should see it exactly the same way. So if you watch this later and go through it, you should be able to take it and see it in that stream. And I don't know, again, I don't know what, I kind of sprung it on Mickey today, so I don't know whether the 5.1 is really working, but there can be some 5.1. Sometimes you'll see us doing channel checks and you'll hear it, and even in post. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Jesse Koester again. How does bit depth compare in bandwidth to resolution changes, compression being equal? For example, is 8-bit to 10-bit a similar jump in data weight to 1080 to 4K?
No, it's actually less. So adding more bits to it will be, it won't be, it's not linear to in the same way that, what you have when you go from 1080p to 4K. I don't know what, you are sprung it on Mickey today, so I don't know whether the 5.1 is really working, but there can be some 5.1. Sometimes you'll see us doing channel checks and you'll hear it and even in back to myself. Next question. All right.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. He said, would HDR or higher resolution...
I don't know what's going on. Hold on. Like what
Yeah.
just happened there?
There was some feed getting into the audio
Okay.
somewhere.
Wow. Okay, that was really confusing. Okay, so I didn't finish what I was doing there. What was the? So what I was going to say with the 10-bit and 8-bit is that the extra bits there are not going to make the same amount of bandwidth, but they're very important because now you're describing. At 10-bit, you have 1024 bits per channel instead of 256 bits per channel. So that creates new stairs. That it's 4 times as many stairs to get from the 8-bit to the 10-bit. So you have a lot less posterization. That's really what you get out of that 10-bit. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, would HDR or higher resolution have more curb appeal when marketing content to the average consumer?
Probably not. I don't think it'll make any difference. We're changing, I don't think anyone's going to notice it right now. We're just trying to figure it out because over time, people are going to expect it to be an HDR. It's just going to be something that slides along and slowly becomes what every TV does. And so a lot of this kind of content will feel ours will feel very vibrant, and a lot of stuff will feel very drab in the not too, probably another year or two. So we're putting things out that aren't not a problem right now. But what will happen is we will be producing shows seamlessly at 5.1 and HDR by the end of the summer. And it won't be a thing. It won't be something we think about. All the stuff works. And as that happens, what's happening now is they're not making any new TVs that are only standard dynamic range. Like they don't make those anymore. And so the thing is suddenly, again, when you think about how things feel, what you're going to have is suddenly we're producing shows that just feel more lively, feel more real, feel more important, and everyone else will look like someone poured coffee over them compared to what we're doing. This is early days. It's not working yet. But we're getting close. And that's what we're working on. We're throwing the ball way down the field to a place the receiver is still 20 yards away from, 30 yards away from as we go down. So that's and then the idea is that we're going to teach everybody else how to do it so that there's a lot of people who are benefiting from that. Next question.
Paul Terry Wallace has our last question today. What's the deal with the HDR mode for the Insta360 Link camera?
That's a little bit of marketing. It's really tone mapping. So basically when it's delivering HDR, it's not really delivering true HDR. It's taking the highlights and mapping them down to that. So that's what you want to look at there. There we go. So we've gotten to the end. That filled up the hour quite nicely. When we got to the beginning, I was like, I don't know if every time we do these Ruthless reviews, I'm like, I don't think we're going to get to the end of the hour. I just don't think it's going to happen. But thanks so much thanks to all of the folks willing to play. Thanks to the great questions from both in the first hour and the second hour. We did a lot of questions today. Thanks to a lot of great questions, both in both hours from the producers, and of course, thanks to the panelists for everyone. And we can't do this without you. Thanks for being part of being a guinea pig and allowing us to figure this out and being part of that whole process. And of course, thanks to the amazing crew that's in the background that makes all this stuff happen and allows us to keep on experimenting with all these things and figuring this all out. And they're really rarely running against the asphalt a lot. Just an incredible crew, both in development as well as the folks they're doing this. And if you want to learn how we do this, the best way to do it is jump on the crew. Just jump on the production crew. You can contact Josh Kaufman. We have things that you can fill out to jump in. We are doing orientations the first Saturday of every month. So the next one's April 1st. It's not a joke. And we will be doing, and we talk a little bit about that, the volunteering process. But if you're interested in how this works, I think we are slowly building the future together, all of us. And so, but the best way to figure out how the mechanics work is to jump on and just do it. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
Sorry about that, Alex. That was totally my fault.
I'm cutting your pay in half. In fact, I'm going to cut it more in half. I'm not paying you for a month.
Wow.
I'm docking your pay.
Harsh. What I was doing is I was listening to the stereo version of the thing, and Bill was over here and you were in here.
Oh, you were listening to the 5.1.
Yeah, a stereo version of the 5.1. Yeah.
Bill, I'm gonna
right into my contract.
I didn't know if I should close or you should close. I was like very confusing. We're in a conflicted state.
I want my contract to specify that if you position me in space, it must be below, because I want to be in the basement talking up to people, scaring them.
The riders are now going to have like 5.1 positioning.
Positioning.